Officer James Mitchell had been patrolling the streets around Buckingham Palace for nearly 8 years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement as he walked his usual route, nodding to familiar faces and keeping a watchful eye on the growing crowd of tourists. It was a typical Tuesday in London, with people from all corners of the world gathering to catch a glimpse of the famous palace gates. As James rounded the corner near the Victoria Memorial, something caught his attention. A small figure sat alone on the steps, shoulders hunched and head down. The child appeared to be crying, her small frame shaking with quiet sobs. James felt his protective instincts kick in immediately. In his years of service, he had encountered many lost children, but something about this little girl tugged at his heartstrings more than usual. The girl looked to be about 7 or 8 years old, with curly brown hair that caught the sunlight, and a dress that, while simple, seemed well made. Her small hands covered her face, and James could hear her soft whimpers even from several feet away. The bustling crowd of tourists walked past her, most too absorbed in their sightseeing to notice the distressed child. James approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. He had learned over the years that frightened children needed gentle handling. He crouched down to her level, his tall frame folding as he positioned himself on the step beside her. The little girl looked up at him with tear-filled brown eyes that seemed far too sad for someone so young. "Hello there, sweetheart," James said in his kindest voice, the same tone he used with his own daughter at home. "I'm Officer Mitchell, but you can call me James. Are you all right? You seem upset." The little girl wiped her nose with the back of her hand and sniffled. "I can't find my daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the street noise. "He was right here, and then all these people came and I got scared, and now I don't know where he went." James felt his heart clench at the obvious fear in her voice. He had seen this scenario countless times before. The area around the palace was notorious for families getting separated in the crowds, especially during peak tourist season. Parents would turn around for just a moment and their children would disappear into the sea of people. "Don't worry, love," James said reassuringly. "We'll find your daddy. Can you tell me what he looks like? What was he wearing today?" The little girl thought for a moment, her tears beginning to slow as James's calm presence started to comfort her. "He's really tall," she said, stretching her small arm up as high as she could reach, "and he has a big smile. He was wearing his work clothes today because he had to come here for something important." "Work clothes?" James asked gently, trying to gather as much information as possible. "What kind of work does your daddy do?" "He's a guard," she said simply, as if this explained everything. "He guards important people and keeps them safe just like you do." James nodded, assuming her father was likely a security guard at one of the nearby buildings or perhaps even someone who worked at the palace in some capacity. There were many security personnel who worked in the area, from private security to government employees. The description could fit dozens of people he knew. "That's a very important job," James told her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she replied, her voice getting a little stronger. "Emma Catherine." "That's a beautiful name," James said with a genuine smile. "Now, Emma Catherine, I want you to stay right here with me while we figure out how to find your daddy. He's probably looking for you too and is very worried." As if on cue, James's radio crackled to life. He quickly adjusted the volume and listened as the dispatcher reported a missing child in the area. The description matched Emma perfectly. James felt relief wash over him as he realized that her father had already contacted the authorities and was actively searching for her. "Emma," James said, "I think your daddy is looking for you too. He's asked other police officers to help find you. You're going to be back with him very soon." Emma's face lit up with hope, and for the first time since James had found her, she smiled. It was a radiant smile that transformed her entire face and made her eyes sparkle. There was something about that smile that seemed familiar to James, though he couldn't quite place why. While they waited, James tried to keep Emma distracted and calm. He told her about the palace, pointing out the different architectural features and sharing some of the lighter, child-friendly stories he had learned during his years on the beat. Emma listened intently, her earlier distress gradually fading as she became absorbed in his tales. "Do you come here often?" James asked, curious about how a young child had ended up alone in such a busy area. "Sometimes," Emma said. "Daddy brings me here when he has to work. Usually I stay inside, but today was special. He wanted to show me something, but then all those people came with cameras and started pushing, and I got scared." James nodded understandingly. The palace attracted photographers and journalists regularly, and crowds could form quickly when word spread about any royal activity. It wasn't uncommon for the area to go from relatively quiet to chaotic in a matter of minutes. As they sat together on the steps, James couldn't help but notice how composed Emma was becoming. Despite her earlier fear, she carried herself with a certain poise that seemed unusual for a child her age. She spoke clearly and politely, and there was something almost regal about the way she held herself when she wasn't crying. "Officer James," Emma said suddenly, looking up at him with those expressive brown eyes. "Thank you for helping me. Daddy always says that police officers are heroes who help people when they're scared." "Your daddy sounds like a very wise man," James replied, feeling warmth spread through his chest at her innocent gratitude. "And you're being very brave, Emma Catherine. Your daddy is going to be so proud of how well you handled yourself today." The radio crackled again, and James heard his call sign. He responded promptly, reporting that he had found the missing child and was waiting at the Victoria Memorial. The relief in the dispatcher's voice was evident as she relayed the message to the searching units. Emma perked up immediately. "Is that about my daddy?" she asked excitedly. "Yes, sweetheart," James confirmed. "He should be here very soon." Emma jumped to her feet, scanning the crowd eagerly for any sign of her father. James remained seated, keeping a protective watch over her while maintaining radio contact with his colleagues. The anticipation in the air was palpable as several police officers converged on their location, all part of the coordinated search effort. Within minutes, James spotted a tall figure pushing through the crowd with obvious urgency. The man was indeed wearing what appeared to be a uniform of some kind, though James couldn't make out the details from a distance. What he could see clearly was the man's face, etched with worry and relief in equal measure as his eyes locked onto the small girl standing beside the police officer. "Daddy!" Emma cried out, her voice carrying across the busy square as she recognized the approaching figure. The man broke into a run, his long strides eating up the distance between them. As he drew closer, James began to make out more details of his appearance. He was exceptionally tall, probably 6 feet 4 inches or more, with broad shoulders and the kind of bearing that spoke of military training. His uniform was immaculate, dark blue with distinctive red trim, and there were various insignia and decorations that James didn't immediately recognize. "Emma Catherine, thank God," the man called out as he reached them, dropping to one knee to scoop his daughter into his arms. The relief on his face was so profound that James felt his own eyes misting up at the sight of their reunion. Emma threw her small arms around her father's neck, holding him tight as if she never wanted to let him go again. "I was so scared, Daddy," she whispered into his shoulder. "There were so many people and I couldn't see you anywhere." "I know, sweetheart, I know," her father murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I was scared too. I turned around for just 1 second to speak to Colonel Roberts, and when I looked back, you were gone. I've never been so frightened in my entire life." James stood up slowly, brushing off his trousers as he watched the touching reunion. The man's mention of a colonel suggested military connections, which aligned with Emma's earlier description of her father as someone who guards important people. James had encountered many military personnel in his years patrolling this area, as there was significant overlap between police and military security around the royal properties. After a long moment, Emma's father looked up at James, his eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. "Officer, I cannot thank you enough," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion he was clearly feeling. "I'm Sergeant Major David Catherine, Royal Guards. This little one is my whole world." James extended his hand, which David shook firmly. "Officer James Mitchell, Metropolitan Police. Just doing my job, Sergeant Major." Emma here was very brave. She stayed exactly where you left her and gave me all the information I needed to help the search efforts. David looked down at his daughter with obvious pride. "That's my girl," he said, ruffling her curly hair gently. "Just like we practiced, right? Stay where Daddy can find you and look for a police officer if you need help." "Officer James was very nice, Daddy," Emma told her father earnestly. "He told me stories about the palace and made me feel better when I was scared. He said you were probably looking for me, too." "He was absolutely right," David confirmed, looking back at James with genuine gratitude. "I contacted your dispatch the moment I realized she was missing. Your colleagues have been incredible, mobilizing so quickly to help find her." James nodded, pleased that the system had worked as it should. "We have procedures in place for exactly these situations," he explained. Children getting separated from their parents around here is more common than you'd think, especially during busy periods. The important thing is that Emma knew what to do and stayed calm. As they talked, James noticed other uniformed figures approaching from various directions. These weren't police officers, but rather men in similar uniforms to David's, all looking relieved as they spotted the reunited family. It was clear that Emma's disappearance had prompted a significant response from whatever unit David belonged to. "Sir," one of the approaching guards called out, slightly out of breath from what appeared to be an urgent search. "Thank goodness. We've been combing the entire area." The captain was about to authorize expanding the search perimeter. David nodded to his colleague. "Stand down the search, Corporal. Emma's safe, thanks to Officer Mitchell here." He turned back to James. "I'm afraid Emma's little adventure has caused quite a stir. We take security very seriously in our line of work." "I can imagine," James replied, though he was beginning to suspect that David's role might be more significant than he had initially assumed. The number of personnel involved in the search, the military precision of their response, and the formal way they addressed David all suggested a higher level of responsibility than a typical security guard position. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we still see what you wanted to show me?" "I promise I won't let go of your hand this time." David looked uncertain for a moment, glancing at his colleagues and then at his watch. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. After what happened, maybe we should head home and try again another day when it's not so busy." "But you said today was special," Emma protested, her lower lip starting to quiver slightly. "You said there was something important happening that I should see." James watched the exchange with interest, noting the obvious conflict on David's face. Whatever had brought them here clearly meant something to both father and daughter. But the scare of losing Emma had understandably shaken David's confidence in proceeding with their original plans. "If I may," James interjected gently, "what exactly were you hoping to show Emma today? Depending on what it is, I might be able to help ensure her safety while you're here." David hesitated, looking around at the crowd that continued to mill about the palace grounds. "There's a ceremony today," he said finally. "A small one, but significant. Emma has never seen her old dad at work, not really. I thought it would be good for her to understand what I do, why it's important." The pieces were starting to come together for James. The royal guards he was familiar with were the ones who stood sentry at various royal properties, participated in ceremonial duties, and provided security for the royal family. It was a position of significant honor and responsibility, one that required extensive training and absolute dedication. "The changing of the guard?" James asked, though he knew the timing wasn't quite right for the regular ceremony. "Something like that," David replied, though his tone suggested there was more to it than he was saying. "A special presentation ceremony. Emma's been asking about my work for months and I finally got permission to bring her. But after losing her in the crowd—" "I understand your concern," James said sympathetically, "but if this is something special that she's been looking forward to, and you've gone through the proper channels to arrange it, perhaps we can find a way to make it work safely." One of David's colleagues stepped forward. "Sir, if I may suggest, we could arrange for additional security. Keep the child in a protected area where she can observe but remain safe from the crowds." David looked down at Emma, who was gazing up at him with hopeful eyes. The internal struggle was visible on his face as he weighed his desire to share this important moment with his daughter, against his fear of losing her again in the chaos of the crowd. "Please, Daddy," Emma whispered. "I'll be good, I promise. I'll hold your hand the whole time." David's expression softened as he looked into his daughter's pleading eyes. The internal battle between his protective instincts and his desire to share this meaningful experience with Emma was evident to everyone watching. James could see the love and pride the man felt for his daughter, as well as the weight of responsibility he carried in his professional role. "Officer Mitchell," David said finally, turning to James with a thoughtful expression, "would you be willing to help us? I know it's beyond your normal duties, but having a police officer nearby would give me peace of mind. Emma seems to trust you, and frankly, your presence would be invaluable in managing the crowd situation." James was touched by the request and the obvious trust David was placing in him. "I'd be honored to help," he replied sincerely. "My shift doesn't end for another few hours anyway, and this area is part of my regular patrol route."
"What exactly would you need me to do?"
Before David could answer, A new voice joined the conversation. "Sergeant Major Catherine, there you are." A distinguished older man in an elaborate uniform approached the group. His bearing spoke of high rank and considerable authority, and James noticed how David immediately straightened to attention. "Colonel Roberts, sir," David responded formally. "I apologize for the delay. My daughter had a small incident, but everything is resolved now." The colonel's stern expression softened considerably when his gaze fell on Emma, who had instinctively moved closer to her father's side. "Ah, this must be the famous Emma Catherine we've heard so much about," he said, his voice becoming warm and grandfatherly. "Your father speaks of you constantly, young lady." Emma peeked out from behind David's leg, curiosity overcoming her shyness. "Are you Daddy's boss?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. The colonel chuckled, clearly charmed by her innocent question. "In a way, yes. Your father is one of my most trusted men. He does very important work keeping very important people safe." James watched this interaction with growing interest. The deference shown to Colonel Roberts, the formal protocols being observed, and the references to protecting very important people were painting a picture of an organization far more significant than he had initially realized. "Colonel," David said, "I was hoping to proceed with showing Emma the ceremony, but given what happened earlier, I'd prefer to have additional security measures in place. Officer Mitchell here assisted in finding Emma when she was lost, and he's offered to help ensure her safety during the proceedings." Colonel Roberts studied James with an appraising look, taking in his uniform, his bearing, and the professional way he carried himself. "Officer Mitchell, is it? How long have you been patrolling this area?" "Nearly 8 years, sir," James replied. "I know these grounds well, and I'm familiar with crowd management around the palace. I've worked many royal events and ceremonies over the years." "Excellent," the colonel said with a nod of approval. "Your experience will be valuable. Today's ceremony is somewhat unusual, and we want everything to proceed smoothly." He paused, looking down at Emma, who was listening intently to every word. "Young lady, are you ready to see what your father does for work?" Emma nodded eagerly, her earlier fear completely forgotten in the excitement of the moment. "Yes, sir. Daddy says he guards important people, but I've never seen him do it before." The colonel smiled. "Well then, you're in for quite a treat. Your father is about to receive a very special honor, one that recognizes his dedication and exceptional service." James felt a spark of realization. This wasn't just any ceremony. David was being recognized for something significant. The level of protocol, the involvement of high-ranking officers, and the special permission granted for Emma to attend all pointed to an occasion of considerable importance. As they began walking toward a more secluded area of the palace grounds, James noticed the careful security arrangements that had been put in place. Plainclothes officers were positioned at regular intervals, and there were clear sight lines that had been established and maintained. This was definitely not a routine event. "Daddy," Emma whispered as they walked, "why are there so many people here? Are we going to meet the Queen?" David's expression became carefully neutral. "We'll see, sweetheart. Today is about understanding the importance of service and duty. Sometimes that service brings us into contact with very special people." James caught the subtle exchange and began to understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. The royal guards didn't just stand at posts. They were personally responsible for the safety and security of the royal family. If David was receiving special recognition, it likely meant he had done something extraordinary in the line of duty. They were led to a small courtyard area that had been cordoned off from the general public. Several rows of chairs had been arranged, and James could see other families present, presumably relatives of other guards who were also being honored. The atmosphere was both formal and intimate, with the weight of tradition evident in every carefully planned detail. "Officer Mitchell," Colonel Roberts said quietly as they found their seats, "I want you to understand that what you're about to witness is not a public ceremony. The individuals being honored today have performed acts of exceptional courage and dedication, often at great personal risk. We ask that you maintain discretion about the specific details of what you observe." "Of course, sir," James replied, fully understanding the sensitivity of the situation. "I'm honored to be here and will respect the confidentiality of the proceedings." Emma was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement, her eyes taking in every detail of the formal setup. James could see her trying to spot her father among the group of guards who were gathering in formation near the front of the courtyard. "There's Daddy," she whispered excitedly to James, pointing to where David stood at attention with several other guards. Even from a distance, James could see the pride and dignity in David's posture, the way he carried himself with the bearing of someone who took his responsibilities seriously. A small military band began to play, and the ceremony commenced with formal precision. James watched, fascinated, as the various protocols unfolded. This was a side of royal life that the general public rarely saw. The quiet recognition of those who served with dedication and courage, away from the pageantry and spectacle that usually surrounded royal events. "Is that really the Queen, Officer James?" Emma whispered. Her eyes wide as a distinguished figure in an elegant outfit took her place at the center of the ceremony. James looked where Emma was pointing and felt his breath catch. Even from their position in the small audience, there was no mistaking the regal bearing and familiar presence of the monarch herself. This wasn't just any ceremony. This was a personal recognition from the Queen to members of her guard who had gone above and beyond in their service. The realization hit James like a thunderbolt. David wasn't just any royal guard. He was someone who had performed an act of such significance that it warranted personal recognition from the Queen herself. And Emma, this sweet little girl he had comforted on the palace steps, was about to watch her father receive one of the highest honors possible in his profession. The ceremony unfolded with military precision and quiet dignity. James found himself deeply moved by the solemnity of the occasion, watching as each guard was called forward individually to receive their recognition. The Queen's presence transformed what could have been a routine military ceremony into something truly extraordinary. And James began to understand why David had been so determined to share this moment with his daughter. When David's name was called, Emma gripped James's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling with excitement and pride. "That's my daddy," she whispered, though her voice carried clearly in the hushed atmosphere of the courtyard. James watched as David stepped forward with measured steps, his bearing impeccable as he approached the Queen. There was something profoundly moving about seeing this man, who just minutes before had been a worried father searching for his lost daughter, now standing before his sovereign to receive recognition for his service. The Queen spoke quietly to David, her words inaudible to the small audience but clearly meaningful to the man receiving them. James could see David's composure waver slightly, emotion flickering across his features as he listened to whatever she was telling him. The personal nature of the exchange was evident even from a distance, and it was clear that this was not merely a formal presentation, but a genuine expression of gratitude and recognition. "What is the Queen giving, Daddy?" Emma whispered, leaning closer to James. "I think it's a medal," James replied softly, watching as a small presentation case was opened and its contents revealed. "It's a way of saying thank you for being very brave and doing something special." Emma nodded solemnly, her young mind processing the significance of what she was witnessing. "Daddy is the bravest person I know," she said with quiet conviction. "He always protects me from everything scary." As the ceremony continued, James learned that David was one of 3 guards being honored that day. Each had been recognized for acts of exceptional courage in the line of duty, though the specific details were not shared with the audience. The privacy of the ceremony made sense now. These were individuals whose work often required them to operate in the shadows, their contributions known only to a select few. When David returned to his position with the other guards, James could see the medal now pinned to his uniform, catching the afternoon sunlight. The pride on the man's face was unmistakable. But James also noticed how David's eyes kept finding Emma in the small crowd, sharing this moment of triumph with his daughter. Following the individual presentations, the Queen spoke briefly to the assembled group. Her words were about service, dedication, and the often unsung heroes who worked tirelessly to protect others. James found himself reflecting on his own role as a police officer, the daily commitment to keeping people safe, and the rare occasions when that service was formally recognized. "These individuals," the Queen said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "represent the very best of what it means to serve one's country and one's fellow citizens. Their actions, often performed without thought of recognition or reward, exemplify the highest ideals of duty and courage." Emma listened intently, her young face serious as she tried to understand the weight of the Queen's words. James could see her making connections between what she was hearing and her father's daily absence for work. beginning to grasp the importance of what David did beyond their family life. As the ceremony concluded, James noticed several photographers had been present. Though they maintained a respectful distance and appeared to be official royal photographers rather than members of the press. This would be documented, but clearly in a controlled manner that respected the privacy and security concerns inherent in recognizing individuals whose work required discretion. Colonel Roberts approached their group as the formal proceedings wound down. "Officer Mitchell," he said, "I want to thank you for your assistance today. Your presence helped ensure everything proceeded smoothly, and I know Sergeant Major Catherine appreciated having you here to help watch over Emma." "It was my privilege, sir," James replied sincerely. "I've never witnessed anything quite like this. It's been an honor to be included." The colonel nodded approvingly. "What you've seen today represents something important: the recognition of ordinary people who do extraordinary things. These men don't seek recognition, but it's important that their service be acknowledged, particularly by their families." Emma had been listening to this conversation with rapt attention. "Colonel Roberts," she said, her voice small but clear, "is my daddy a hero?" The colonel's stern features softened into a gentle smile. "Yes, Emma Catherine, your father is indeed a hero. What he did required great courage, and it's why we're here today to honor him." Emma beamed with pride, and James felt his heart warm at the sight of her joy. Whatever David had done to earn this recognition, the impact on his daughter was profound and lasting. This ceremony would become a cornerstone memory for her, a moment when she fully understood the significance of her father's work and the respect he commanded from others. As the small crowd began to disperse, David rejoined his family, Emma immediately running to him and throwing her arms around his waist. "Daddy, you got a medal from the Queen," she exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. "I did indeed," David replied, lifting her up so she could get a closer look at the decoration now pinned to his uniform. "And the best part is that you were here to see it happen." James watched the interaction between father and daughter with deep satisfaction. What had begun as a routine encounter with a lost child had evolved into something far more meaningful, a glimpse into a world of quiet heroism and the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others. "Officer Mitchell," David said, shifting Emma to one arm so he could extend his hand to James. "I cannot express how grateful I am for everything you did today. Not just finding Emma when she was lost, but being here to share this moment with us. It means more than you know." "The gratitude is mutual," James replied, shaking David's hand warmly. "What I witnessed today has reminded me why we do what we do. It's been an honor to meet you both." Emma looked back and forth between the two men, sensing the mutual respect and understanding that had developed between them. "Officer James," she said thoughtfully, "are you a hero too?" James smiled, touched by her question. "I just try to help people when they need it, Emma, just like your daddy does. Sometimes that's what being a hero really means, just being there when someone needs you." As the royal ceremony came to its formal close, the small gathering began to break up into more informal conversations. James noticed that several of the other honored guards had brought family members as well, wives, parents, and children, who had been given this rare glimpse into their loved ones' professional lives. The atmosphere shifted from formal ceremony to something more personal and celebratory. Emma was still studying her father's medal with fascination, her small fingers tracing the edges of the ribbon while David held her securely in his arms. "Can I touch it, Daddy?" she asked with the reverence children reserve for truly special objects. "Of course, sweetheart," David replied, positioning the medal so she could examine it more closely. "This medal represents not just what I did, but what all of us do every day. It's about protecting people and keeping them safe." James watched as Emma gently touched the medal, her expression serious and thoughtful. He could see her trying to process everything she had witnessed, connecting the formal ceremony with her understanding of her father's work. It was a profound moment of realization for such a young child. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "when you're at work and I'm at school, are you protecting the Queen every day?" David exchanged a meaningful look with James before answering. "Sometimes, Emma. My job is to make sure that important people can do their important work without having to worry about being safe. The Queen is one of those people, but there are others too." James was struck by how David managed to explain his role in terms a child could understand, while maintaining the discretion his position required. It was clear that balancing his professional responsibilities with his role as a father was something David navigated carefully every day. Colonel Roberts approached their small group again, this time with a more relaxed demeanor now that the formal proceedings had concluded. "Sergeant Major Catherine," he said, "I hope Emma enjoyed the ceremony. It's not often we have such young guests at these events." "She loved every minute of it, sir," David replied, "though I suspect she'll have many questions over the coming days as she processes what she witnessed." "That's exactly as it should be," the colonel said approvingly. "Understanding the importance of service is something that should start early. Emma is fortunate to have such a fine example in her father." Emma, emboldened by the colonel's friendly tone, piped up with another question. "Colonel Roberts, do you have children too?" "I do indeed," he replied with a warm smile. "They're grown now with children of their own. But I remember bringing my son to his first ceremony when he was about your age. He was so impressed that he decided he wanted to be a soldier just like his old dad." "Did he become one?" Emma asked with innocent curiosity. "He did," the colonel confirmed. "He serves in a different unit now, but he followed the family tradition of service. Perhaps one day you'll decide to follow in your father's footsteps too." James noticed David's slight wince at this suggestion, and he understood why. The life of a royal guard, while honorable and important, came with significant risks and demands. As a father, David would likely prefer his daughter to have safer, less demanding career options available to her. "For now," David interjected gently, "Emma is focused on school and learning about the world. There's plenty of time for career decisions later." Emma, however, seemed intrigued by the possibility. "Could I really be a guard like you, Daddy? Could I protect important people too?" "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart," David replied, his voice filled with love and pride. "But remember, there are many ways to serve and help others. Officer Mitchell here serves the community as a police officer. Teachers serve by educating children. Doctors serve by helping sick people get better. The important thing is finding a way to make a positive difference in the world." James appreciated being included in David's explanation, and he could see that the man was trying to broaden Emma's perspective on service beyond the military context. It was a thoughtful approach that honored his own profession while encouraging his daughter to consider all her options. As they continued to chat, James learned more about David's background and the path that had led him to his current position. He had started as a regular soldier, worked his way up through the ranks, and eventually been selected for the elite Royal Guard unit. It was a career built on dedication, training, and an unwavering commitment to duty. "The training is extensive," David explained when James asked about the requirements for his position. "It's not just about physical fitness or military skills. We have to understand protocol, diplomacy, and how to blend into different environments. Sometimes we're visible, like during ceremonies, but much of our work involves being present without being noticed." Emma was listening to this conversation with rapt attention, clearly enjoying this rare insight into her father's professional world. James could see her filing away every detail, building a more complete picture of what David did during the long hours he was away from home. "Is it dangerous, Daddy?" Emma asked with a directness that children possess. David paused, clearly weighing how honest to be with his young daughter. "Sometimes it can be challenging," he said finally. "That's why we train so hard and work as a team. We look out for each other and make sure everyone stays safe." James admired David's careful balance between honesty and reassurance. The man was helping Emma understand the reality of his work without frightening her or causing unnecessary worry. The afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard. James realized that his regular patrol duties were calling, but he found himself reluctant to leave this extraordinary experience behind. The encounter with Emma and David had given him a new perspective on his own work and reminded him of the interconnected nature of public service. "I should probably get back to my regular duties," James said reluctantly. "But I want you both to know how much this day has meant to me. It's been an honor to meet you and to witness something so special." David shifted Emma to his other arm and extended his hand once more to James. "Officer Mitchell, I hope our paths cross again. London isn't such a big city, and I suspect we'll run into each other again during your patrols." "I'd like that," James replied sincerely. "And Emma, you take care of that brave daddy of yours, all right?" Emma giggled and nodded solemnly. "I will, Officer James. And thank you for finding me when I was scared and for being here for Daddy's special day." As James prepared to leave, Colonel Roberts pulled him aside for a private word. Officer Mitchell, what happened today with Emma getting lost could have been a serious security incident. The fact that you handled it so professionally and discreetly is noteworthy. I'll be mentioning your assistance in my report. James was touched by the recognition. Just doing my job, sir. Though I have to admit, it's been one of the more memorable days of my career. The best days usually are the unexpected ones, the colonel replied with a knowing smile. Take care, officer. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of you around here. As James walked away from the courtyard, he could hear Emma's laughter mixing with her father's deeper voice as they continued to celebrate the day's events. He found himself smiling as he resumed his patrol, carrying with him a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation for the various forms that service and heroism could take. The encounter had started as a simple case of a lost child, but it had evolved into something much more meaningful. James had witnessed not just a ceremony of recognition, but a moment of connection between a father and daughter, a glimpse into a world of quiet courage, and a reminder of why he had chosen his own path in law enforcement. Little did he know that this chance encounter would mark the beginning of an unexpected friendship that would enrich both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. As he continued his patrol around the palace grounds, James found himself looking forward to the possibility of seeing Emma and David again, knowing that their paths would likely cross in the tight-knit community of those dedicated to protecting and serving others in London. 3 months after that memorable day at Buckingham Palace, Officer James Mitchell was walking his usual patrol route when he spotted a familiar figure waiting by the Victoria Memorial. This time, however, Emma Catherine wasn't alone and frightened. Instead, she stood confidently beside her father, both of them scanning the crowd as if looking for someone specific. Officer James. Emma's voice rang out clearly across the bustling square as she spotted him approaching. Her face lit up with genuine joy, and she began waving enthusiastically, while tugging on her father's sleeve to get his attention. David looked up from whatever he had been reading on his phone and broke into a warm smile when he saw James walking toward them. Unlike their first meeting, David was dressed in civilian clothes today, looking relaxed and approachable in jeans and a casual jacket. The transformation from the formal military bearing James remembered was striking, showing a different side of the man he had met during that extraordinary day. What a pleasant surprise, James said as he reached them, genuinely delighted to see them both looking so well. I was wondering if I might run into you two again. How have you been, Emma? We've been looking for you, Emma announced with the directness that James remembered fondly. Daddy said you patrol this area and we wanted to find you to say thank you properly. James looked questioningly at David, who seemed slightly embarrassed by his daughter's straightforward admission. We've been coming by occasionally on my days off, David explained. Emma has been asking about you regularly since the ceremony. She wanted to make sure you knew how much that day meant to us. It meant a lot to me too, James replied honestly. I still think about that day often. How has Emma been processing everything she witnessed? David's expression grew thoughtful. It's been interesting, actually. She's developed a much deeper understanding of what I do, and it seems to have given her a sense of pride rather than worry. She's been telling everyone at school about her daddy's medal and about the police officer who helped us. Emma nodded vigorously. I told my teacher, Mrs. Henderson, all about you, Officer James. She said that police officers and guards like Daddy are both heroes who help keep people safe. She even let me do a presentation about it for the class. James felt a warm glow of satisfaction at hearing how positively the experience had affected Emma. Often, encounters with lost or frightened children ended when they were reunited with their families, and he rarely learned about the long-term impact of those moments. Knowing that Emma had grown from the experience rather than been traumatized by it was deeply gratifying. I have something for you, Emma announced, reaching into a small backpack she was carrying. She pulled out a carefully wrapped package and presented it to James with obvious pride. Daddy helped me make this for you. James accepted the gift with surprise and curiosity. As he unwrapped it, he discovered a beautifully framed photograph from the ceremony 3 months earlier. It showed David receiving his medal from the Queen, but in the background, clearly visible, were James and Emma watching from their seats. Someone had captured the moment when Emma had gripped James's hand during her father's recognition, preserving not just the official ceremony but the personal connection that had formed that day. One of the royal photographers took this, David explained. When I saw it, I knew we had to get a copy for you. It captures something special about that day, something beyond the formal ceremony. James studied the photograph, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the way it preserved the memory of their shared experience. In the image, he could see the wonder and pride on Emma's face as she watched her father being honored, and his own protective presence beside her as they witnessed the historic moment together. "This is incredible," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you both so much. This will have a place of honor in my home." Emma beamed with pleasure at his reaction. "Daddy said it was important to remember the people who help us, and that saying thank you is one of the most important things we can do." "Your father is absolutely right," James agreed, looking at David with renewed respect. "That's a valuable lesson to learn young." They stood together in comfortable companionship, watching the familiar bustle of tourists and locals around the palace grounds. James noticed how different the dynamic was between Emma and David now compared to their first meeting. The trust and understanding that had developed following the ceremony was evident in the easy way they interacted, the confidence Emma displayed, and the relaxed pride David showed in his daughter. "Officer James," Emma said thoughtfully, "do you have children?" "I do," James replied. "I have a daughter about your age named Sarah. She's 8 and she's been hearing stories about you for months now." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Really? What did you tell her about me?" "I told her about a very brave little girl who stayed calm when she was scared, who was polite and helpful when she was lost, and who got to see her daddy receive a very special honor from the Queen," James explained. "Sarah was quite impressed and said she hoped she would be as brave as you if she ever found herself in a similar situation." Emma stood a little taller at this praise, clearly pleased to be thought of as brave and impressive by another child. David watched his daughter with obvious pride, and James could see how much the positive reinforcement meant to both of them. "Maybe Sarah could meet Emma sometime," David suggested, "if you think they'd get along well. We're often in this area on weekends, and Emma doesn't have many friends outside of school." James felt touched by the invitation and the suggestion of continuing their friendship beyond chance encounters. "I think they would get along wonderfully," he said. "Sarah loves hearing about different jobs and careers. Meeting the daughter of a royal guard would be quite exciting for her." As they continued to chat, James learned more about how the ceremony and the subsequent months had affected Emma's understanding of her father's work. She had become something of a celebrity at school, not just because of her father's medal, but because of her ability to articulate the importance of service and duty in terms her classmates could understand. "She's developed quite a vocabulary around civic responsibility," David said with amusement. "Yesterday she told me that she wants to find a way to serve others when she grows up, though she's still deciding between being a police officer, a teacher, or maybe even following in my footsteps. All noble choices," James observed, "though I suspect whatever path she chooses, she'll approach it with the same thoughtfulness and courage she showed that first day I met her." The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting the same golden light across the palace grounds that James remembered from that first encounter. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. They had come full circle from a moment of crisis to one of celebration and friendship. "We should probably head home," David said eventually, checking his watch. "But I'm so glad we finally found you, Officer Mitchell. Emma has been quite determined to track you down and deliver that photograph personally." "I'm honored by the effort," James replied sincerely, "and I hope this won't be our last meeting. Perhaps next time we can arrange it in advance rather than relying on chance encounters." They exchanged contact information, cementing what had begun as a professional interaction into a genuine friendship. As James watched Emma and David walk away, Emma skipping happily beside her father while chattering about their successful mission to find Officer James, he reflected on how a single moment of kindness toward a frightened child had evolved into something much more meaningful. The photograph in his hands would serve as a permanent reminder not just of an extraordinary day, but of the connections that can form when people from different walks of life come together in service of others. James knew that both his life and Emma's had been enriched by their chance meeting, and he looked forward to watching her grow up, knowing that her father was not just a protector of others, but a hero worthy of recognition from the highest levels of society. As he resumed his patrol, James carried with him not just a treasured gift, but a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of how individual acts of kindness could ripple outward to create lasting bonds and positive change. The encounter had reminded him that being a police officer meant more than just enforcing laws. It meant being present for people in their moments of need, and sometimes, if he was very fortunate, being remembered for making a difference in someone's life.